my professional friends, I know that this is not the best time to discuss about equally not a very pleasant topic of search and seizure, but we all are holed up in our houses because of the lockdown, and therefore this is the beauty of this profession, that each one of us is pursuing our unsatiable appetite to learn more and more. So in that series, CA Sansar Shri Vivek Khurana has been quite proactive in spreading this light of knowledge. Friends, search and seizure in any system of jurisprudence is an overriding power which is vested in the state, and such power is required for the protection of the social security. But when such kind of a power is vested in the state, then it is required to be regulated very closely. In fact, this question whether such kind of a power should at all exist in any civilized society has always bothered the minds of those who matter. Because when such kind of power is vested in the state is already very mighty institution, then such powers are prone to be misused. And therefore, when the power which in itself is considered draconian and which itself is considered as a serious invasion on the fundamental rights, and therefore this question has always bothered the minds that such provision should not exist in any civilized society. But when the validity of such kind of a provision was challenged before the court was impressed upon that there is a vast proliferation of the black economy, there is a large scale of tax evasion, and therefore even if such provision is harsh, but for the purpose of the general public good as compared to the individual good, because this is settled law that the individual good has to yield to the larger public good, and therefore it was sought to be impressed upon the court that despite such provision being harsh, now should be allowed to stay on the statute. It was impressed upon the court that there are inbuilt safeguard mechanism which has been made in the system, and those inbuilt checks and balances which have been made into the system would ensure that the arbitrary use of such harsh provision, should not be made by those who are responsible for the implementation of such kind of powers. I am reminded of the decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Puranmal, and this decision was reported in 93 ITR at page 505, in which the constitutional validity of the such provisions were upheld by none other than the highest court of the land, wherein the court said that we are convinced that the power under section 132 is to be exercised or would be exercised evidently on good ground, and when there was an evidence in possession of the department of the existence of those conditions which are there under section 132, and therefore in view of such checks and balances having been made into the system, and in view of the fact to which we cannot remain oblivious and cannot be allowed to shut our eyes, whereby the proliferation of the black economy is rampant, tax evasion is rampant, and therefore the court said that we are constrained to uphold the validity of section 132, and that is how this provision, even if it is termed sometimes as draconian, now is staring at our face by retaining itself on the statute as a result of the successive pronouncements of the courts. Friends, whether it is search or whether it is survey, these are the investigation tools. They are not end in themselves. The objective of these investigation tools is to collect evidences which have got bearing on the tax liability of a person, and the next objective of such provision is to catch hold of the asset itself, which has been built out of the unaccounted income, so that at later stage, when there will be tax demands, the tax demands can be paid or defrayed out of such assets. Though power to seize any asset is not there in case of survey, but in case of search, of course, any asset which is not accounted for, which has been acquired out of unaccounted income, is liable to be seized. An objective of the provision of search and seizure is to catch hold of the asset itself, so that the future tax liabilities can be defrayed out of it. And the third objective of these provisions, which I think is very important provision, is to send the deterrence message, to deter those who are prone to commit such kind of things, which may invite such kind of incisive investigations from the tax department. And therefore, these are the objectives with which the power of search and seizures are conducted by the tax department. Therefore, the next question which comes, now who can be searched? Now section 132 prescribes three conditions, and those three conditions or three situations or three types of persons whereby the power of search can be exercised or the warrant of search can be issued by the competent authority. And the first kind of category of such persons is that those persons who have been issued summons under section 131 to produce certain books of accounts or documents, or those persons to whom notice under section 142(1) have been issued asking them to produce books of accounts or documents, but on the date appointed for compliance, the compliance is not made. So it has to be remembered that the summon issued by the tax authorities in accordance with law, or a notice under section 142 subsection 1, which has also been issued by a tax authority and in accordance with law, the non-compliance of such notices may invite the issuance of the search warrant. The second category of persons is that those persons to whom the summons or the notice which I have just referred either have been issued, the date of compliance has not come, or the summons or the notice have not been issued as yet, but if issued asking them to produce certain books of accounts or documents, it would not be produced. So this condition now enables the competent authorities to anticipate the non-compliance. And the third situation is when a person is in possession of any money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article or things which represents either wholly or in part concealed income or the property which has not been disclosed or which would not be disclosed, then also the warrant of search can be issued. So at least one of these three situations should exist before the competent authority can issue warrant of search based upon the information in his possession. So as I said in the beginning, that there were three safety mechanisms or three checks and balances which were made into the system before the warrant is issued. So the first situation is that at least one of these three situations should exist. Only then the warrant of authorizations can be issued. The second safety wall which has been made by the legislature to the system is that such authority to issue warrant has been given to an authority of a rank which is sufficiently higher in rank. It is not any income tax officer who can issue the warrant of search. The designated authorities are there which are quite senior in rank and in hierarchy, like Principal Director General, Director General, Principal Chief Commissioner, Chief Commissioner, Principal Director, Director, Principal Commissioner, Principal Commissioner, and in certain situations the additional and joint directors, if they are empowered by the board to issue the warrant of search. So this is the first safety mechanism which has been built by the legislature to the system, and it has been purposely made because it is, you can take it as a presumption that as an authority is vested in a position which is sufficient higher in rank, then that authority in whom that power is vested is supposed, is presumed to use, or is expected to use that power objectively, fairly, reasonably, conscientiously, based on evidence. And therefore, the legislature has ensured that this power is not given to any income tax authority, but is given to the designated income tax authorities whose designations and positions are quite senior in that hierarchy. The second system is the existence of at least one of those three situations which I just conveyed a little while ago. And the third is that these three conditions, or any one of those conditions, or any one or more of these three conditions, the existence of these conditions must be based on the material in possession of the competent authority, based on which that authority will form a reason to believe. This phrase reason to believe is very important. Check. This expression is not new, and you all may recollect that the identical expressions there under section 147, now which enables the tax authority or the assessing officer to reopen a concluded assessment if he has reason to believe that the income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. Therefore, the existence of one or more of these three conditions now must be there based upon some material in the possession, and when competent authority forms the reason to believe as to the existence of these conditions, only then the warrant of authorization, the warrant of search, which is loosely called warrant of search, though the technical term is warrant of authorization, now can be issued. So the checks and balances have been made into the system so as to ensure that such power which is prone to be abused and misused, and which is prone to be used arbitrarily, may not be so. And that is why you may recall that whenever the challenge is made before the court, and of course the challenge is made before the court, and the court not below the high court, because you are challenging the action of the state exercised through the competent authority to search. Therefore, this can be challenged under Article 226 and 227 of the Constitution. And whenever such kind of challenge is made before the court would like to be assured and convinced that these three safety mechanism and valves are intact before, and in case any aberrations or the deviations are found by the court, then court comes very heavily. After all, that basic jurisprudence that these are very harsh provision, they should not in the first place be allowed to exist in any civilized society, but because of the peculiar situations which are there which are existing in the society, I mean, their validity has been upheld by the court, and therefore the court want the existence of these three safety walls in place before the actions of these authorities can be upheld by the courts. Now, insofar as the first condition was concerned, it was based on a post facto situation where the date of compliance was there, but then no compliance was made. And therefore, it is a case which envisages, which contemplates a very easy situation, which can be proved also later with the help of the record, that here was the notice which was issued asking a person to produce certain books of account, but on the day that compliance has not been made. But then the second situation, which is based on anticipation, which is based on some kind of a forecast that the notice if issued will not be complied with. Now, even for that anticipation, if this anticipation is called in question, or the action of search is called in question before the court would like to be assured, court would like to be convinced from the competent authority as to what was the material in your possession based upon which this belief that the notice would not be complied with was formed. Therefore, this word reason to believe is not reason to suspect. It is not equivalent to reason to opinionate, but then reason to believe. And this phrase has come to be interpreted, though this phrase is of three words, but those three words are quite of significance. The courts have said that if there is a material and that material is having live nexus with the belief as to the existence of one of these three conditions, only then it can be said that there was a reason to believe. The contrary to such reason to believe is that if there is no material for the belief of the existence of at least one of these three conditions, or even if there is belief, or even if there is a material, but that there is no live nexus with the material with the belief, then also the courts have come very heavily against the exercise of power on the ground that in such a situation it cannot be said that there was a reason to believe. Therefore, this provision, search and seizure, now has to be tested in case it is called in question before the court on the touchstone and on the parameters of these things which I have just discussed. Now, competent authority we all know now. But then who can be authorized to conduct searches? So if the warrant has been issued by these officers which I just narrated, principal chief commissioner, principal director general, and thereafter till the stage of the commissioner or the director, then such authorities can authorize even to an additional director. But then if additional director is the person who has issued the warrant, then he can obviously issue that authority, or the authorized persons can be an officer below his rank. So in that situation, the deputy director, the deputy commissioner, assistant director, assistant commissioners, and the income tax officer. No officer below the rank of income tax officers can be the authorized officer. So it has to be seen. So now the next point which comes is that what can an authorized officer on the strength of this warrant of search can do? Because when the warrant is issued, the authorized officers are entitled under the law to do certain acts, and those acts, the acts of search and seizure, and those things which can be done are listed exhaustively under section 132 subsection 1. So the first authority which the authorized officer gets as a result of the warrant of authorization is that he has got power to ingress and search. So he has got power to intrude into any building, place, vessel, vehicle where he has reason to suspect that books of accounts or documents or money, bullion, jewelry for which the warrant has been issued may be found there. So he has got power to ingress and search, and this is a very important function, and the ultimate efficacy of that search is dependent upon as to how the ingression is made. Now search is an action which requires the surprise element. The surprise element, if it is taken out from the action of search, then its real efficacy is seriously jeopardized, and therefore it is sought to be ensured at the time of making ingression that all the places and all the persons with respect to whom the warrants have been issued, and all the places with respect to which the searches have to be carried out, they are carried out at once at one stroke of time, so that there may not be any scope for losing the evidences in that process. So this, I remember in one of the cases when mobile telephones were not there, there was slight mismatch between the time when the strike was made, and in that process some very unpleasant things happened, and in that process very vital evidences probably were lost. And therefore, and I tell you, these authorized officers, now they are trained as to how they have to make ingress, because when they make ingress, the persons and the places where the search is undertaken, there is a stiff resistance, or obviously it is a human nature. When anybody intrudes into the privacy, it is bound to be resisted, and therefore at that stage these authorized officers have to be very careful, have to be very sensitive as to what can happen. So the first power which I was discussing, that the authorized officers acquire as a result of the warrant to search is to make ingression and then search the building, place, vessel, vehicle where he has reason to suspect that these books of accounts or documents are kept. The next power which the authorized officer gets as a result of the warrant of search is that he has got power in certain situations to break open the lock of any building, door, vehicle, receptacle where the keys are not available and he has reason to suspect that those books of accounts or documents or money, bullion, jewelry for which the warrant has been issued are likely to be kept there. So, though this power is there to break open the lock, etc., but then authorized officers also, being responsible officers of the tax department, they do not use this kind of a power recklessly, mechanically, or arbitrarily when the cooperation is not given. And authorized officers, despite all persuasions, is not able to persuade its officers, persuade the party or the persons who are occupying the premises, then such kind of actions at times are to be taken. But then obviously this kind of a power is there. The third power is that the authorized officers can search any person against whom the warrant may not be there, but then who is found inside the house, who is entering into the house, or who is coming out of the house. Now, to give this kind of a power to the authorized officer became necessary as a result of an experience which the department had to face in the year 1972 in Chandigarh. It was a case of a search. One gentleman was already residing temporarily in that house. Now, when that guest who was residing temporarily found that his host is in problem, then he said, okay, now he would like to make an exit. But then the authorized officer said that how can you go without search? I'll have to search. That authorized officer immediately said to that guest, okay, I may not be having any warrant at this time, but then kindly wait, I'll get one for you. And then the blank search warrants came, the name was asked, it was filled then and there, and then he was searched. Later on, when the search was called in question before the High Court, now all these factual things were narrated, and when it was sought to be impressed before the court, and the court was impressed that there was no statutory power to search any person other than the person against whom the warrant of search is there, even if that person is found residing or in the house, then the Union of India or the tax department tried to bring Rule 112 in support of this action. But then there was no statutory backup in the sense that there was no power under the act. There was the power under the rule, and as all of us know that the rules being delegated legislations cannot overpower the statutes, and therefore the department or the legislature became conscious about the absence of such kind of power in the statute, and therefore the amendment was brought in the year 1975, according to which now any person who is inside the house, who is entering into the house, or who is coming out of the house which is under search, now can also be searched. So this is the power. In fact, I always say, even at the cost of repetitions, I would say even today, that law is evolving. How does it evolve? It evolves after taking into account the developments which happen, the experiences which the legislature gains, and different fact situations which could not be envisaged originally by the legislature, and that is how the gaps are filled. And if in that process the law becomes complex, then be that as it may. The next power which is given to the authorized officer, that he can ask a person who is responsible for keeping the electronically, or who is responsible for keeping the electronic records with him, to cough out the password. So now there is a specific power under the Income Tax Act by which the authorized officers can compel a person who was knowing the password of an electronically kept record, and then that person would be under the duty to cough out the password. Then the authorized officer has got power to seize books of accounts, documents, and then inventorize. Now, it is not necessary that only those books can be seized which were not produced or which were not likely to be produced. If you remember in the beginning, I said that one of those three conditions, that the books are not produced or books are not likely to be produced. But then when it comes to the power of the seizure with the authorized officer, then his power is that he can seize books of accounts, documents, irrespective of the fact whether these books of accounts or documents are the books of accounts or documents which are maintained in the ordinary course of the business. But then of course he will have to inventorize it, and the inventory sheet will have to be shared with the person from whose custody and from whose possession these documents are required.
Sir, one query is there.
The officer has got that he can seize undisclosed assets. Now, insofar as the seizure is concerned, authorized officers can seize only the undisclosed assets. Now, that is a different matter, that sometimes the seizures are made very indiscriminately, and in that process even the disclosed assets are seized. We will come to that aspect later. But he, under the law, the authorized officer under the law is competent to seize only undisclosed assets, and those undisclosed assets can be cash, those undisclosed assets can be jewelry, can be any other thing, fixed deposits, it can be KVPs, NSCs, it can be other valuable instrument, because money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article or thing, and the word article or thing is of very wide amplitude, and movable properties are covered. Of course, immovable properties cannot be seized, movable properties can be seized, and he will have to prepare the inventory after seizure. Then he has got power to place identification marks on the books of accounts or the documents which is not seizing. So because those books of accounts or document which is seizing in any case will be taken away by him, but then those books of accounts or document which is leaving then and there, now they need to be identified, so that later on, when during the course of assessment or investigations the authorities ask them to be produced before them, such identified documents, can be produced. The authorized officers have got power to seek police assistance also. Now, in order to maintain any unsavory situations, to maintain law and order, and all government officers are expected to extend cooperations, and that is what the law says. Authorized officers have got power to seek police assistance. Now, before the search begins, the authorized officer has got power to appoint even the panchas, the witness, because the search has to take place in presence of two witnesses. The witnesses have to be independent witnesses. They must be respectable persons. Everybody is presumed to be respectable unless somebody has been convicted of an offense involving moral turpitude. So two punches can be appointed, and kindly to mind it, once an order to appoint a person to act as a punch is served on that person, then that person cannot refuse to act as a punch, and in case he disobeys that order, then he is liable to be prosecuted. He has got power to restrain on the removals of the valuables. He can pass order under section 132 subsection 3, directing the person not to remove them, and this order, which is passed under section 132 subsection 3, has to remain effective for 60 days. Then one very important power the authorized officer gets, he gets as a result of and on the authority of the warrant of search, is that he can record a statement. Now, a statement is a very important piece of evidence, and there is a power under section 132 subsection 4 which empowers the authorized officers to record a statement, and the section says that it can be used as an evidence. Therefore, this is a very wide, and kindly to mind it, this power to record a statement is materially different from that power which is there under section 133 capital in case of survey. In case of survey, that statement is not recorded on oath, cannot be recorded on oath. Even if recorded on oath, the courts have said that to that extent the oath has been administered is beyond his power, and therefore that has to be taken as if that statement is statement simpliciter without the oath having been administered. Whereas this is a statement under section 132(4) in case of cert is required to be administered on oath, and therefore anything which is administered on oath has got evidentiary value, strong evidentiary value, and section 132(4) says in itself that this statement can be used in any proceeding. Then comes as to what can be seized, because after all the action of search leads to the collection of evidences and then the seizure of undisclosed assets. So the first thing which can be seized is if there is a cash which is unexplained, which is undisclosed, that cash which is not proved with the help of the direct documentary evidences or the circumstantial evidence certain situations, that is liable to be seized. So if there is a cash, the source of which is not explained, if a person is maintaining books of accounts, the cash in excess of the cash in hand which is appearing in books of account, that is liable to be treated as unexplained cash unless that person is in a position to explain the source of that cash which is not coming in books of account. So unexplained cash, like in case of those persons who are not maintaining books of account, in that situation that person will have to show either from the withdrawals from the bank which have been made immediately prior to the date of search, or from other circumstantial evidences, then that much amount will be treated as explained. Otherwise, the rest of the amount is liable to be treated as unexplained, and the authorized officer would be entitled to seize it. So far as stocks are concerned, prior to 1st June 2003, even the unexplained stock also could have been seized. At that stage, it used to be put under the deemed seizure. But then from 1st of June 2003, it has specifically been provided that in case of search, even if the stock is undeclared or undisclosed, then it cannot be seized. But then it poses problem at times. In case of the jewelers, in case of the bullion merchants, where such jewelry and the bullion is kept at the residence, the question, because there is a very thin line, the question is now whether the stock, because those SSC say, sir, it represents the stock which have been kept at the residence for safety and security purpose. But in such a situations, merely to say that it is the stock and kept at the residence and therefore it be treated as the stock of the business alone, now this is something which will have to be proved with the help of circumstantial evidences that it was the part of the stock, and only then it can be treated as a business stocks. Otherwise, department's insistence always remains that since it has been found from a residence and since it is undisclosed, therefore we will not assign this stock as the status of the business stock. So this is a thin line, but then it will have to be proved by leading the evidence from the SSC side. The next is about the undisclosed jewelry. If there is undisclosed jewelry, the jewelry which has not been declared under the wealth tax, or which has not been declared, or which cannot be said to have been acquired, or which is not proved to have been acquired from the disclosed source and disclosed amount, now that undisclosed jewelry is liable to be seized. But many times now the Wealth Tax Act is no longer effective. But then in that situations, those jewelries which have been declared in the past, many times a person may not be assessed to wealth tax. Therefore, in such a situation, the board has issued instruction that where the person is not filing wealth tax return, therefore, in such a situation, 500 gram per married lady, 250 grams per unmarried lady, and 100 gram per male member is the extent of jewelry which should not be seized. Therefore, in case a person is not wealth tax SSC, but jewelry is within this much of limit, then it is not liable to be seized. That is what the board has issued instructions. The books of accounts, as I said, books of accounts, documents, and loose papers found, whether disclosed or undisclosed. If they are undisclosed or they are exhibiting certain undisclosed transactions, of course, the authorized officers would go in for their seizure. But if the books of accounts and documents of the loose papers are in respect of the disclosed transactions, then it will be within the jurisdiction of the authorized officers to take a conscious and judicious call as to whether such kind of books of accounts or documents should be seized or not. Valuables found like FDR, shares, debentures, securities, KVP, IVP, hundis, pronotes, which are found and but not recorded in the books of account, they are liable to be seized. Now, how the search action takes place, I'll briefly deal and then I'll come to different issues.
Sir, a query.
Yes.
One question from Parul Agarwal.
Pardon?
He wants to know, sir,
Pardon?
whether they can also enter into the consultant office to search the client data, and what the power consultant have. Even they can also search the other client's data.
Yes, this is a very good question. In fact, there is a very old circular of the board which has been given by us in our books, in which the instructions have been issued by the board that whenever such situation arises, whereby the office of the consultants are sought to be reached, then only that person with respect to which the investigation is on, only his data alone should be seen. So, I mean, that is there in our books of search published by the taxman. Readily, I am not able to give the number and the date of that board's instruction, but it is there.
Okay.
Now, of late, it has been seen that department makes it a point to search the consultants' places also. In fact, if you remember, the person should be one of those three persons which are mentioned under section 132. So this consultant may not be that person, but with respect to that person who is there under section 132(1), if the authorized officer has reason to suspect or the competent authority has reason to suspect that those books of accounts or documents or money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article or thing in respect of that person is kept at the consultant's place, or for that matter any third party's place, then that party's place becomes the subject matter of search. That person, that consultant may not be the person searched, but that place becomes the place of search. I tell you, it so happens, I remember one of the cases which I had an occasion to deal, and it is reported, and its name is Madhu Gupta. It's reported in 350 ITRs most probably. Now, in that case, that lady was searched. On the ground came to be mentioned in that decision when their lordships call the record, call the satisfaction note, and reproduce that satisfaction note, that search was, though in connection with some other person, the satisfaction note said only to this extent that the books of accounts relating to that other person may be found at this lady's place. So the court said that in such a situation, the warrant of search cannot be in the name of that lady, because the moment you issue the warrant of search and you make panchanama in the name of that lady or that person or that consultant, then that lady or person or that consultant must be a person who falls under at least one of those three categories of section 132(1). Therefore, the department in such a situation, unless they have got some material against that consultant himself, should conduct or may conduct a search in case of the consultant's office by issuing warrant in case of his SSE on this premise and on this suspicion that the books of accounts relating to that person may be found at his place. In case of survey, the situation is somewhat different. In case of survey, now it has been seen and it has been so provided in the act itself that if a person who is being surveyed or any person who is attending the affairs of the business premises of that person, if he states during the course of that survey that books of accounts or the stocks or valuables of this person or my books of accounts are kept at my consultant's place, then that consultant's place becomes the extended place of business, and that also becomes the subject matter of survey. But as I said, in such a situation, survey is not on that chartered accountant or consultant, and search is not on chartered accountant or consultant but on his client, because chartered accountant consultant is not the person to whom any notice was issued, or to whom any notice if issued would not be complied with, or a person in whose possession books of accounts, document, money, bullion, jewelry, valuable are found. So he cannot be searched as if he is one of those persons, but then certainly he can be searched on the basis of the warrant issued in the name of his client. But in such a situation, the department has to restrict himself only to the things which pertain to the client, and other clients' things cannot be seen. Unfortunately, unlike lawyers, chartered accountants' relationship with their clients are not saved
Yes.
by that confidentiality. I mean, I do not know why should it not have been conveyed so far. It should be, because the difference is not much. But at this stage, the mahal is not appropriate by any stand. Mahal not because of the COVID-19, but overall mahal is not to suggest even such kind of or give such kind of a suggestion. So I think I have replied that query. Should I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Should I proceed? Okay.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
yes. Now, how the search takes place? There are certain things which I would like to. Of course, I have spoken about the search warrant is issued. I have spoken about that the authorized officers given search warrant, and then the strike is made at the premises. That warrant is shown to the person who is found in occupation of that premises. He is shown that warrant. He is asked to put his signature in support of the fact that he has seen that warrant, and copy is not given. The warrant's copy is not given. I do not know why is it not given, because despite the fact that there is nothing confidential into that warrant, then preliminary statement is liable to be recorded. This is very important, which I think that I must deal with it. Now, preliminary statement is the statement which is recorded under section 131(1) capital A. Though there is a difference of opinion whether the search party or the authorized officer can have any power to record a statement even before the actual start of the search, but preliminary statement is recorded, and that preliminary statement is also recorded by the authorized officer in the capacity of the court before the actual search begins and the oath is administered. The object of such preliminary statement is to record certain preliminary replies or certain preliminary facts elicited from that person, so that later on, if actual things are found at variance with that, then it will be onerous responsibility for that person to explain as to how and why his initial statement is at variance with the actual things found. So recording of preliminary statement is very important. Lots of things are asked at this stage about the identity of the person, the places of business, the godowns maintained by a person, because in case it is not asked how many godowns do you have, inventories are prepared, and later stage some more godown, SSC says that he was having some more godown, and if the stock of that godown had been taken into account, then there would not have been any difference. So the objective of preliminary statement is to bind a person by his statement to be taken on oath, so that he cannot wriggle out, he cannot come out from that factual statement which he has made easily without establishing positively to the contrary. So this is the objective of. So it is asked how much money, how much cash is there, what to whom does it belong, how much is the amount of jewelry, where are the jewelries kept, whether this jewelry belongs to you or belongs to somebody else, so that later on you cannot be heard saying, no, part of the jewelry belongs to somebody else. So preliminary statement, and these preliminary statements which are recorded go a long way in establishing or unestablishing a particular fact is stated to be so. This is very important because this statement is contemporaneous statement. Contemporaneous statement means now which is taken at the first available occasion, and therefore the law has attached greater evidentiary value because it is untutored, because it is what should I say, uh, without any interference or without any uh, teaching from anybody, and therefore the law attaches great sanctity to such contemporaneous statement which is recorded. So in the preliminary statement it is asked, I mean, how many vehicles do you have, I mean, how much is your monthly expenditure or the annual household expenditure, have you performed any marriage, how much expenditure have you incurred, where are the children studying, where are the go down the material which is in your possession, whether this is the material regarding which the bills have been received or it consists of material regarding which the bills are. So the whole objective of the preliminary statement is to elicit certain preliminary factual informations so that those factual informations can later on be tallied with what is found during the search, and in case if there is a variation, the burden to prove that actual statement with the statement which he made initially was not correct and was not correct for this reason is on him, is on his shoulder. So, and this is a very big skill required for recording the prelim. Then the search starts. Cash, jewelries, stocks, loose papers, valuables, they are all identified, then inventorized, and then the statements are taken under section 132(4). The statements are taken from time to time during the course of, it's not that at the end of the search only the statement will be taken, but then 132(4) statements are recorded during the course of search from time to time. Explanations are sought with reference to the books of accounts, the documents, the loose papers, the valuables which are actually found. But then it is not necessary that the statement under section 132 has necessarily to limit to those things. No, it can be in relation to any other aspect which has got bearing on the proceedings of the income tax and under the Income Tax Act or Wealth Tax Act. So unexplained cash, then the seizure memo is prepared. Unexplained cash is liable to be seized. Then the jewelry for valuation of jewelry, then the registered valuers are asked to evaluate. At this stage, uh, inventory is prepared, then the computer or any other room, that is 132(3) restraint is listed, or the hard disk is copied and then taken away. Lockers will be operated, the contents will be inventorized. Now, even before opening the locker, the statements are recorded, and the statements like preliminary statement asking that person who is an occupation of the locker as to what are the contents of it, they belong to whom, I mean, all those things are asked. So, and then thereafter locker is opened, its contents are inventorized, and that is how, I mean, that search I have seen in practice, and you must have seen also, that the search is kept pending by putting certain restraint, and these restraints have to remain in operations till 60 days. So the authorized officers can conclude the search within 60 days from the date when the search was initiated or when the first warrant was executed. So search is concluded within 60 days by putting the restraint, and inquiries are made by the authorized officers in between, and that is how the search proceeds. Now there are certain important things which need to be borne in mind during the course of search as to the rights and obligations of the person. Now, the first thing which needs to be remembered is that whether it is jewelry or whether it is stocks, they are valued jewelry is valued by the registered valuer. Inventory is prepared based upon the input which is given by your employees or by you at the time of search and survey. Now, in case of search, so far as jewelry which is unexplained is liable to be seized. Jewelry which in the opinion of the authorized officer is explained or explainable, that is not seized. Stocks are not liable to be seized, it has to be left then and there. So in respect of those assets which are left then and there in the possession back of the SSE, it must be ensured that quantity and quality of that jewelry is very important. Quantity and quality of that jewelry, bullion or valuables or stocks, that must come to be recorded very correct, because if quantity and quality of these things have not been recorded correctly at the time of search or survey, depending upon as to what is the asset, then at later stage it will be very difficult for you to say, prove and establish that the quantity and quality of these assets were not so as came to be noted in the inventory list, because anything which is noted in the inventory at the time of investigation action is supposed to be a contemporaneous document prepared then and there. Therefore, the law attaches the greatest value to the correctness of those inventories. In respect of inventory of those assets which have been seized by the department, if you say that the quantity is not that which has come to be mentioned in inventory, or if the quality is not that which has come to be mentioned in inventory, then of course you can always say at any stage of the proceeding, sir, since the asset is in your possession, even today, right from that day when you seized it, and therefore whatever is the quantity and quality, I say this much quantity and quality, you say this much quantity and quality. Now you open it today and there will be doodh ka doodh and pani ka pani. But in respect of those things which are given back to you, the recording of quantity and quality, that is very important. The second thing, many times I have seen that during the course of search and survey, the person who is under search or survey, he craves for the presence of his counsels, because at that stage he feels that he should be given the benefit of his counsel's presence. But the law is very clear in this regard, so far as the law is concerned, that search or survey, these are the investigation measures. These are not assessment proceedings. The findings of investigations will have bearing in the assessment, but they are not an end in themselves. They are means to an end, and the end is the assessment. And since these are investigation proceedings, therefore at this stage the benefit of the presence of your counsel now is not allowed to you. Therefore, so far as the position of law is concerned, like, but then it has been seen by me in practice, and so must have been by you, that initially the presence of the counsel is restricted by the authorized officer, but at the later stage when he has to wind up, he has to get several things reconciled. He has to ask from the SSE as to how much is the jewelry which is disclosed, certain factual and accounting informations which is very essential for the authorized officer, that person in the search may not be knowing, or maybe he may be knowing that because of the circumstances he may not be able to recollect. So in that situation, counsel's presence are allowed by the authorized officers at the later stage of the investigation process, but SSEs cannot ask as a matter of legal right that their counsel should remain by their side. The next thing which I think I must share, that the recording of a statement, that's very important, because as I said in the beginning, or as I said in the middle, that statement is a contemporaneous piece of evidence. Therefore, certain things will have to be remembered. First of all, let us understand it is not a test of memory. I have seen authorized officers insist that, okay, if this is the thing, or if you have accepted any gift in last 6 years, No, it is not a test of memory. Now, certain factual things which are in your books of account, which are appearing in your passbook. Now, if it is a matter of record for which you would need or you would have to have access to your record, only then it can be replied. Then it can always be said, sir, I do not remember as of now. It is a matter of record. Everything is accounted for and appearing in books of account, and therefore everything is disclosed. Or I do not remember. Therefore, if I do not remember, or if that person does not remember, then he cannot be forced to remember. If somebody does not remember, obviously, I mean, memory has got its limitation. So, either if an SSE does not remember is one thing, or even if he does not remember, but still he gives some reply. Now that is somewhat very dangerous, because if a person does not remember and yet replies for the sake of giving reply, now that reply in later stage may be put against him, and since it has got very strong evidentiary value and mostly against him, then that person may be in problem. Therefore, if a person does not remember, then he can always say that he does not remember. He cannot be forced to remember, and therefore in such a situation, if you do not remember, then do not give any reply just for the sake of giving reply. And in case your reply needs you to have access to the books of account, your passbooks, your records, then you can always say that. The next thing about the rights and obligations, that those assets which have been acquired from 2017, now the time period has been 9 years, though it has been mentioned 10 years, but then if you calculate the relevant previous year beyond 6th year, though it is mentioned 10 years, but then if we calculate it from the from assessment year, it becomes 9 preceding years. But so beyond that, if an asset has been acquired, so the position of law is that if you can establish that a particular asset has been acquired beyond the limitation period, then even if that asset has been acquired out of the undisclosed source, then also there are not much income tax implications. So that aspect is also there. एक मेरे दिमाग में एक बात थी जो मैं कहना था regarding that presumption under section 132(4)(a) or under section 292(c), and this presumption is applicable in case of survey also. Earlier, initially, it was not applicable in case of survey; it was applicable only in case of cert. But I mean, its applicability has been extended under section 292(c) lately for surveys also. Now, presumption, there are 3 presumptions. The presumption is that the books of accounts or documents which are found from the possession and control of a person during search or survey should be deemed to belong to that person. Belongs to that person, not deemed as belongs to that. Their presumption is belongs to that person. The second presumption is that the contents of these documents are true and correct. And third is about that it is duly signed and stamped in case it is required to be so signed and stamped. Now, these 3 presumptions, though they are rebuttable presumptions, but then the burden to prove these, the burden to disprove these presumptions is on the SSE. Therefore, if a person wants to say that even though this document has been found, this cash has been found, this jewelry has been found from my possession and control, but it does not belong to me, it belongs to somebody else, the burden will be on him to prove it. Or the contents of the documents are true and correct, but then kindly mind the language of the legislature. Contents of the documents are true and correct. That means contents, it doesn't say the contents would represent income invariably. It says contents are, but what I have seen, and so must have you been, that whenever any document is found, even with some scribblings, which may not make any logical sense, the department says the presumption is there since you have not been able to explain this document, and therefore this document shows nothing but the income. No, it's not. The presumption is only that the contents are correct. The contents are, there are certain scribblings. Contents do not lead to further presumption that the contents represent income of this person. So this has to be seen, that presumption burden to prove recording of your statement, that is very important, because it has been my experience, and when I say that it has been my experience, I mean it, that many times the authorized officers record what do they want. They will ask flurry of questions in one breath and then expect you to answer. They will pick, though it should not be, because after all, authorized officers who record the statement, they are by and large fair, objective, impartial, independent, because they do not have any vested interest also to temper the evidence. But because of the nature of this act of search, and at times when it goes on and on for days together continuously, so these aberrations are bound to creep. It is not improbable or impossible. These are the hard real situations which I have seen. So SSC must ensure that the question comes to be recorded correctly, and then his answer to that, and he can request very politely to the authorized officer, sir, what is your question? You kindly note it. Let me read that question, and then whatever my answer is, it should be recorded verbatim, so that at later stage the SSC may not find himself against the odds. So this has to be taken care of. Location of the items, that must come to be recorded correctly, that because that's very important. Because I have my own experience that if a cache has been found from a particular room, and if it is not so recorded, it has been found from that room, now its very explainability at later stage, and that may be difficult. If it is clubbed together by clubbing the entire cache found from all rooms together, then it can convey something else, though it can cut both ways. But I have seen as my experience that if the location of the asset found is recorded correctly, it goes a long way in seeking the proper explanation about its source. So that yes, of course, authorized officers of the tax department, tax officers, they do not have any power to abuse or imprison. They do not have any power to bring anything out from outside, because they offer themselves for search. So that is a different matter, that this power to offer them, or this duty to offer themselves for search of the SSC, is merely academic, because in that situation, who is in a proper frame of mind to take their search? We can discuss about the assessments also. Now when the search is over, the evidences which have been collected, direct, documentary, they are supplied to the assessing officer. The appraisal report is prepared. Appraisal report is their internal document. Now even at the stage of the appraisal report preparations, the department insists the SSCs to be part of it, whereas the extreme action of search having taken place, now the department cannot insist on the SSC to join the investigations for an ad infinitum period. That is highly unfair. A person cannot be compelled to be a witness against oneself, but then the department does, and the SSCs are forced to participate. Based upon that, appraisal report is prepared. Appraisal report is nothing but their internal document containing the summary of the findings of the investigating officer, or that is the person who initiated the search, the DDI or the EDI, and then all those material are handed over to the assessing officer. Then the assessing officer, then the cases are centralized also. So I am talking of the assessing officer with whom the jurisdiction to proceed with assessment, and then he initiates assessment under section 153A by issuing the notice. The notice has to be for preceding 6 years, but now relevant assessment years have also been added from 2017. Any search having taken place on or after 1st April 2017, then the notices can be issued even beyond 6 years, if but another 3 years, 9 years, though it is, as I mentioned in between, though the year mentions the 10 years, but then if you calculate it, it comes 9 preceding years. So the only conditions going beyond 6 years till 9 years is that if there is any income represented by asset in excess of 50 lakhs of rupees, only then the notice for that year can be given. So there must be some asset which may have been built out of the income, which has not been taxed. That alone now can be brought within the within the sweep of extended relevant previous year, and that is what the interpretation is coming out, because it is yet to be tested before the court. So when the notice comes, time limit is given for filing the return be filed, copies be taken, copies of the records which have been seized should be taken so that you can file the return. The returns have to be filed, and then the assessment is made. And then after the assessment, in case of search, the judicial opinion is divided as to whether it is once the search takes place, it is a fresh assessment, or it is an assessment qua incriminating material found as a result of search in case of unabated assessments. So Delhi High Court is on one side, Bombay is also on this side, that search assessments, unabated assessments cannot be made without there being any incriminating material found as a result of search, whereas Allahabad, Kerala, and other high courts are against this proposition. It says the section 153A has to be read literally. It says once the search takes place, the assessment or reassessment of preceding 6 years have to take place, and therefore judicial opinion is divided on this. 153D is there, the approval of joint commissioner will have to be taken in case of 153A assessments. That is what has been provided, and it has also been provided by the judicial decisions that even that approval cannot be mechanical, application of mind should be evident on it, and that is how. Then there is 153C. A person may not have been searched, but books of accounts, documents relating to him, pertaining to him, or any informations contained in his documents may have been found from the place of the person searched, or money, bullion, jewelry, a valuable article or thing belonging to this person may have been found from the place of the person searched. Then the assessing officer of the person searched is required to record his satisfaction to this effect that these money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article thing belongs to that person, or books of accounts, documents pertain to him, or any other information has got relation to him. And then he will have to send all these things to the assessing officer of this third person with respect to whom section 153C proceeding has to be initiated. 153C, his assessing officer then will have to record another satisfaction that as per the satisfaction of the person searched, he has received these documents, and these books of account, these money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article or thing, and they belong to him. And on thereafter, this person will also be treated as if he has also been searched. But then again, the requirement of law now has been whittled down by Honorable Supreme Court in the case of Singat Technical Education Institute's case, in which the courts have said that only those years can be taken under section 153C with respect to which money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article or thing, or books of accounts or documents have been found. So that is how the assessments are made, and thereafter these assessments, since most of the times, are made not in the way the assessees desire, therefore the assessees do invariably take them